Alrighty. Greetings, everybody. Um, this is my first ever video. Um, my name is Brian. I live in a small town in the state of Michigan called Centerville. I've been playing WoW since the Burning Crusade, about 3 or 4 months into when the expansion was released. My cousin told me about it. He had got my uncle into it. Started playing on my uncle's account. I actually did not have my own account until Cataclysm. Um, in MOP, I created the tune that you're looking at right now, which is my quote-unquote main, Big Bo Bam. I'm a male Pandaren warrior. I have primarily only been arms. However, I did play Fury in Warlords of Draenor and Prot as well. I was actually a tank at the beginning of Warlords of Draenor for a guild because I didn't like the changes that Arms and Fury went through. Now, I'm making this video because I'm passionate about my character and my character's class, and I don't know of anybody that plays a male Pandaren that puts information out there. Playstyle isn't normally different for all the individual races. There's some niches. Orcs have a higher burst because of their racial. Draenei have a self heal. Humans have an extra trinket for stuns. As a Pandaren, I do have an in cap. It's a 2 minute cooldown. It's not anything special, but it comes in handy sometimes in world questing. And I do PvP, so it can be used as a certain form of CC. I am relatively geared. 938, be probably about normal, maybe heroic and Taurus right now. I don't raid really that often. I was in a raiding guild at the beginning of Emerald, or the beginning of Legion. I was raiding Emerald Nightmare. I was actually a Mythic Raider. However, my guild fell apart shortly after Nighthold was released, and I just didn't really feel like going through all that drama again. It was like the fourth or fifth, sixth guild. Anyways, this video is going to be about the arms specialization only. More specifically, your rotation for doing DPS, and maybe some niches about the specific talents, builds, and your honor talent builds. But I'm going to be comparing the two primary builds based on the gear that you have. I currently have it's from Raid Finder, I understand people, the 2 set. I do not have the 4 set yet, so I cannot actually fully give you the breakdown for the trauma build that I'm going to cover here in a couple minutes. But primarily, you can still take a basis off of this. Right now, I'm using the more consistent single target Rend build and Titanic Might build. That's always been our kind of go-to build ever since Focus Rage and Deadly Calm got put on the same row, and you just never use Focus Rage anymore. So that this build is Dauntless, so your abilities cost 10% less rage. This basically is basically the bread and butter of the build. If you did not have this talent, this build would actually be kind of hard to maintain, just because you want to keep a high uptime on Rend as best as you can. But outside of procs, which I'll cover here in a couple minutes, sometimes Rend will fall off, but for the most part, you want to try and keep Rend up as much as possible. Double time, standard. I mean, basically what this allows you to do is in encounters and in world questing and stuff, it just makes questing easier because you have more uptime on getting to targets, and it also gives you access to a bigger rage pool because charge always generates rage every time you use it. What this can do in like a rating per se is if you have a moment where you know you can step away and not jeopardize your positioning, you can, right after you see your rage generated from an auto attack, you can literally take like a side step or a back step a couple feet just to get that little 8 range, as the tooltip now shows, that 8 range that you have to be at least 8 yards away from a target to use it, and then immediately charge back in and just generate a quick burst of rage, 20 rage, as the tooltip says. And with you having 2 charges and the cooldown being reduced to 17 seconds instead of 20, you can effectively do this every 10 seconds. 10, 12 seconds. Well, yeah, roughly, until you run out of charges. Then you gotta wait a little bit and you get your charges back. It's You won't notice that you're out of charges fairly too often. Next is, like I said, Rend. Rend does fairly consistent damage. Um, if you don't have the foreset, which means you won't be doing trauma. Avatar, like a lot of websites say, really helps your burst rotation. If you like really need to burst something down, typically you would normally pair this up with like a battle cry blade storm on an AoE group. Single target, it's not really powerful until the execute phase. Um, you'll notice the damage, but it's not going to be anything significant. But during like the execute phase, that first 5 seconds of your battle cry with Avatar was going to really greatly empower your executes to just do really good damage. And then also because we have the Executor's Precision artifact trait, which I will show in a couple minutes, that boosts your Mortal Strike. It can really power that up too. Uh, Next is Bounding Stride. This is just for extra mobility. Second Wind is good in world questing if you find yourself having a lot of downtime. Like let's say you just killed a mob and you were practically dead, but there's no more aggro, and you can't get to anything to Victory Rush because you should have a Victory Rush if you just killed something. You can just mount up, and you literally will just completely heal your health bar in a matter of seconds as soon as your combat drops. D-Stance. D-Stance is a good defensive capability, and it's pretty much standard. Like, you have to have this if you're playing PvP, which again, I will cover that later. Um, it's just a flat 20% damage reduction. It's a 20% wall. However, keep in mind you do lose 10% of your damage. A lot of people fret over the 10%. 10% is not that huge, but if you're staying only in defensive stance for a consistent amount of time, you will see a actual drop in your DPS that actually does become substantial. But it's a quick thing to like pop into for a quick mechanic, or if you're out questing and an extra mob gets pulled accidentally and you're still struggling with the one you're on, it can maybe get that little bit extra time to kill the target you're on so you get a victory rush. And then with one target, you should never really struggle against one target unless you're doing content harder than your gear level, which usually means that you're doing Argus with like a fresh and you're like 820 item level. Um, Outside of that, I prefer Bounding Stride just because I am geared enough to the point where I'm never really actually in any trouble unless I purposely pull too much mobs. You can actually get to a point where you pull too much. Next, you have Titanic Might. Standard for this build basically means that your Colossal Smash debuff is practically always up on your target because it lasts 16 seconds, but the cooldown of Colossal Smash is only 12 seconds. So you will always have it back up in time to reapply the full duration of the debuff. You'll find that this actually, even on 12 seconds, will proc quite often with this build because you're spending Rage consistently on Rend, Slam, and Mortal Strike, to where you should get a lot of procs. I kind of get a little bit more because of my relics, something I'm not going to cover in this video, but if you want to find that information, it's out there. In for the kill basically means that it gives you a 10% haste buff every time you use Colossal Smash for the original 8-second window that it normally has. So what this does is basically every time you use Colossal Smash for the normal window that it has, if you weren't running in Titanic Might, you attack faster, which means you generate more rage consistently to be able to fuel the rotation. What this actually also does too is because haste lowers the global cooldown on Blade Storm and your Mortal Strike. Every time you use this, you'll almost guarantee to get 2 Mortal Strikes inside the original 8-second window. It will come back up, even if it doesn't proc from Tactician. It will come back up. It helps the rotation out. It smooths out your rotation. You will notice the difference of the 10% haste compared to when you don't have it because you'll actually rage starve. A lot of people think 10% isn't that big, but considering 10% haste when you, like right now I only have 12% haste, that doubles my haste ratio. So in that sense, I'm generating twice as much rage essentially. And then finally, Opportunity Strikes. This, when we got it back, was our old mastery from MOP, and it's phenomenal. This thing actually, it like the tooltip says, it'll proc up to a 60% chance based on the target's missing health to trigger an extra attack. The 60% is when the target has lower HP. So when you're first fighting a mob, the chance for it to trigger within the first 30 or 40% of a mob's HP is going to be kind of low. But then once you get past the 60% of their own HP and you start hitting like 50% and lower, this thing starts to proc relatively on almost on demand. Like you'll notice it because it's basically an extra weapon string. This does fairly good consistent damage. It almost does about, let's see, a tooltip for slam. Yeah, it does about 1/3 the damage of slam. So if you get this to proc at least 3 times within 3 globals, you've got an extra slam essentially. Sorry, wrong tooltip. Also, it generates 5 rage every time it procs. So as the target gets lower and lower in HP, this will start procking consistently. And it's your melee abilities, which means this literally can proc off of everything. Your auto attack and all your mortal strike, your colossal smash, your slam, your whirlwinds. And the cool thing is if you whirlwind, for every target you hit, you have a chance to automatically have opportunity strikes also hit that target. So if you have like 6 targets around you and you hit all of them with whirlwind, each one of those has a chance for opportunity strikes to strike them on top of that whirlwind strike. When whirlwind swings, it actually hits each individual target 3 times for the total damage. So the damage of whirlwind is actually split up into 3 separate strikes that hits every single target when you swing it. So since whirlwind hits 3 times every time it swings, you have 3 chances to proc opportunity strikes off of each one of those swings. So you can generate quite a bit of rage and a lot of the damage for AoE. So that's the consistent build if you're not running the trauma build, which is what you should be running if you have the 4 set. Since I only have the 2 set, I don't run this build. I'm going to attack the target dummy that's behind me. I'm going to attack the greater sparring dummy because he's the raid dummy for my raiders. I could attack the lesser one, but the raiding is going to give you a good enough assumption of the rotation. And just going to give you like a baseline of the damage that I deal at my item level. I took all my buffs off just so that it's just flat, straight gear. I'm not having any pre-pots, no potions, and nothing like that. Just to give you a fairly overview of the rotation. So, here we go. Right away, I have the legendary ring, so I get an execute proc. If you have a tactician proc, so like your colossal smash comes back up, like I just right now, you always want to do that and then immediately into a mortal strike or an execute. Like my ren's about to fall off, but it's still better for me to do this right here because I will get more damage out of it. So I get another proc. Use it. Okay, now now this is the part right here. I'm gonna step back real quick. If you didn't notice, I didn't get a tactician proc. And I had to reapply Rend. The Rend was under the 3-second mark. When you get about the 3-second mark left on Rend's duration, you want to reapply Rend if you haven't got a Tactician proc or Mortal Strike is not off cooldown. You always want to be pressing Mortal Strike on cooldown. It's your hardest hitting ability. It's going to do the most damage until the target is in execute range. Unfortunately, with these target dummies, I can't show you the execute range, which is actually very pivotal to the trauma build. So that's something I'm not going to be able to show you. But you always want to be pressing Colossal Smash if it procs into a Mortal Strike. If it doesn't and Rend is under 3 seconds, you want to be refreshing Rend. That's the only time you don't refresh Rend is if you get a proc at 3 seconds. It's still better to Colossal Smash into a Mortal Strike. Spending Rage on Rend has a chance to re-proc your Tactician, which means you had a wasted proc chance on your Mortal Strike, and and basically you get Colossal Smash back again, but you always want Colossal Smash to be paired up with Mortal Strike. What I mean by that is when it procs, you want to be able to also press Mortal Strike as right after you've Colossal Smashed. If you're spending the rage on Rend first to reapply the bleed before using the Mortal Strike, you'll get another proc chance, and which means your Colossal Smash, or a chance to proc. And if it does, your Colossal Smash will reproc, and you essentially had a buff up. Every time we use Colossal Smash, which I will tooltip into the weapon, every time you use Colossal Smash, you get an 8-second buff that increases the damage of your next Mortal Strike or Execute, or that increases the critical strike chance by 50 or 56%. And then on top of that, you have what's called our Shadow Defenses, which is our golden. And then it says after using Colossal Smash, your next Mortal Strike or Execute deals 50% additional damage. So you have a 1.5 just from using Colossal Smash for 8 seconds, and then you have an extra crit chance. Mine's higher because I have three relic extra traits. I didn't want to get into those, but I'll just kind of mouse over them so you can see precise strikes on the rank 3 of that one, and precise strikes. Baseline, this is normally only an extra, I think, yeah, it's 8% every single time, so take 24%. So it's actually a 32% chance to crit. That's on top of your regular crit chance. So whatever your crit chance is, add that to this. That's the proc chance you're going to get. That is why it's always best to Colossal Smash into a Mortal Strike. Or if you're in an execute phase, you Colossal Smash into an execute until you get 2 stacks of precise strikes. That's something I can't really show you unless I can have an execute target dummy, and I don't have an execute target dummy. I can only explain it. So, anyways, that was a comparable. My DPS hit about 1.4 mil, like kind of when I leveled out of the thing. And granted, I didn't use Battle Cry. I didn't use any of my burst things. That's just your basic rotation. So at 938 item level, by doing that with the Tactician procs, I'm pulling 1.4 mil. Most of your rating guilds right now, their top end person on his consistent damage, based on classes, is about 2 mil and a little bit higher. Some classes are hitting higher points. So I'm not doing bad damage, but again, these are also people that are like considerably geared. They have their set bonuses and they have a higher item level than I do. At 1.4 mil, you're not gonna have an issue with anything. So I'm gonna untarget the dummy. I'm gonna change my talents real quick. Now I'm gonna do the trauma build. Now the trauma build, if you take the trauma build, you have to take the talent called Fervor of Battle. So I'm gonna switch this real quick. You keep double time. You switch over to trauma, and you switch over to Fervor of Battle. Now what this does is it means that you're not going to have a high uptime on your Colossal Smash because your cooldown is going to be 20 seconds, but the debuff is only going to be 8 seconds. So with this build, you might have times where Colossal Smash falls off. Don't fret. Colossal Smash is strong and you need to be pressing it on cooldown, but if it falls off for a short period of time, this build is actually designed to almost make it so that it doesn't fall off because you're spending a lot of rage. Effectively what this build does is, as you see I'm switching my tooltip, is you never use Slam now. Whirlwind becomes your main filler because of this talent right here called Fervor of Battle. Whirlwind deals 80% increased damage to your primary target, the target you're targeting. So you have to take this damage that Whirlwind's tooltip says, which is 292,000, and you have to multiply it by 0.8. Now, considering Whirlwind only does about 30,000, actually about 30,000 less damage, a 0.8% increase to this is almost doubling it. So it's essentially it's going to be topping out at almost like 430,000 damage. So at 430,000, it's actually doing almost the same amount of damage as your Mortal Strike ability. And this build also does change your rotation a little bit. Now, Whirlwind costs a lot of rage. It costs the same amount of rage as Ren does. They both cost 30, but with Dauntless, they only cost 27. Again, this build also greatly relies on having the Dauntless talent because you're using high cost rage abilities. Arms does not generate rage like Fury does consistently from everything it does. Its auto attacks, its Bloodthirst, and its Raging Blow. So its rage intake is not high. It's just the way Blizzard has it. This is the way to kind of keep you from just always having rage to do something. So that, because if you did, you literally can do a crap ton of damage with this build. What Trauma does is when you slam, Whirlwind, or execute, which is your 3 fillers outside of Mortal Strike, execute being your big one during the execute phase, cause the target to bleed for 20% of the additional damage over 6 seconds. So it takes 20% of that damage that you did with that particular ability and puts a bleed on the target. But every time you use an ability that applies this bleed, so like I could Whirlwind a target and then slam them, both apply the bleed, it takes the damage from the previous bleed and adds it to the new bleed. So you can stack this bleed up consistently high if you can keep a high uptime on using abilities that cost rage to proc this ability. So with this build, even with the Dauntless, this build can actually get more rage starved than the previous build because you have to be using Whirlwind at least every 3 seconds to keep the bleed from trauma up consistently, which is what you're looking for. You're looking for that bleed to just stay always stacked up on the target. Same thing applies though. It's still better to always use Mortal Strike after Colossal Smash. Outside of that, you don't use anything other but Whirlwind. Literally the only thing you use is Whirlwind. So we'll just start this rotation up real quick. Again, I have the legendary ring, so I'm going to use an execute proc. Okay. Yep, so you see there's another proc. Because you're spending a lot of rage. Now here's the part where it sucks. Like right here, you get rage starved. Proc, Mortal Strike. I get an execute proc, I use execute. Now, if you don't get a Colossal Smash proc, you actually want to just press Whirlwind. Because of the bleed component added to it, it actually will do more damage overall than the Mortal Strike will. And that's the part where that can rage starve you, is because right now your Whirlwind costs 27 rage, but your Mortal Strike only costs 18 with Dauntless. But as you can see, except for that one point I had, okay, I got another point right here. Okay, I spend the rage, I get the Colossal Smash, and I get the Tactician proc. But right here, I get rage starved for a second. I'm still rage starved. That's the only downside to the trauma build, is you will be points where you're rage starved. Now here comes into play the other talents and why they're so pivotal. So at points like that, that's why double time comes in great handy, because you can take a couple steps back and charge the target and generate that extra 20 rage. However, again, and you might have to use a program unless you're really good at catching this, you want to always step back after you've already auto attacked a target. The reason being is the swing time for your auto attacks will continue to rank up. Like, they'll count down. So auto attack, I have to wait like 3 seconds before my character will auto attack again. That 3-second window will still tick down regardless of whether I'm on the target or not. So that way, if I take a step back, by the time I charge back in, I get the trade rage from charge, and then I'll immediately auto attack because I'm in combat and I should have already auto attacked. Typically, you can see this tooltip every time you're in range of a target and you step away, and then your screen has a red thing that says not in range or you cannot attack the target. That's because that's literally your swing timer for your auto attack, and it's telling you can't do that because you're not within range of the target. So that's the trauma build. Again, you want to try and maximize that bleed as much as you can, but outside of that, the main focus is you always want to be Colossal Smashing into a Mortal Strike if you get a Tactician proc. And that's really the main two specs for rotation. I didn't show you cooldowns because cooldowns are irrelevant to your base rotation. They're used when you need to burst damage, when you need a little bit of extra damage, because you have a window on a boss, say he takes more damage, or on the pull, because everyone's pre-potting and the boss is not going to do mechanics for a short period of time. There's most bosses, the first 10 seconds of the fight, there really isn't any mechanic that goes out, because the timer for the boss's mechanics will start to tick down, and then a mechanic will happen. So it gives you a free reign to kind of use your cooldowns to get the maximum amount of damage, and then outside of that, you've got to figure those other windows out when you have them. But that's the two builds. That's the Ren build and that's the Trauma build. I didn't look at my meter, so I'm sorry, I missed that part for you guys. Again, but I'm not wearing the 4 set, so my Trauma build isn't going to be as powerful as someone else's. That being because the 4 set states when you Mortal Strike a target, that Mortal Strike increases the damage and the critical strike chance of your next Whirlwind or Slam by 12%, stacking up 3 times. Now, if you run in and you Colossal Smash Mortal Strike and get a Tactician proc Colossal Smash Mortal Strike, you just stacked a buff on yourself that makes your next Whirlwind or Slam do 24% more damage. So if you're already running the Fervor of Battle, which you should be because you're using Whirlwind as your filler, that means your next Whirlwind is going to do 104% more damage because of the 80% plus the 24%. Or no, sorry, that's not a flat damage buff. That's a crit chance. So it has an extra 24% chance to crit on top of your regular crit chance. If it crits, it does double. So that's 0.8 times 2. So you're like 430 gets doubled to like 800 and something. And that's not factoring in the Colossal Smash debuff if it's on the target, making you do even more damage to the target. It equates to very high damage. I don't have the 4 set, therefore I can't really show you the Trauma build. Very powerful. Anyways, that's pretty much it for the rotation build for each different spec. There's not much else to go around that. You use Bladestorm as a filler. either whether the AoE damage or if you need to stay on the boss and you've just applied Colossal Smash and used Moto Strike and you can fit it, or your rage, like say if you're rage starved and you can't compromise your positioning, which means you have to stay where you're at. Blade Storm is a good ability to use as a filler just to generate rage because you will auto attack during Blade Storm. So this allows you to continue to still do damage to the boss, and then allow your auto attacks to change it. Usually, you get about two, maybe a third one if you're lucky. If you've just used Colossal Smash and you still have the haste buff up, you might get a third auto attack in there. Every auto attack generates basically about 22 to 47 rage. 47 if you crit, 22 is your baseline. So, you get 3 baselines at 66 rage. If you can get 3 crits, you could cap your rage bar out. You don't want to do that. Fine. Also, that's another thing I should probably say in real quick. You should never get rage capped. If you're rage capped, you're not pressing abilities. You honestly are. I mean, during Lust, there's a good chance you could get rage capped, but with the trauma build, you should be spending rage fast enough. If you are getting rage capped because you're getting Colossal Smash procs back to back, which can happen, sometimes you may have to chance it and go ahead and use a whirlwind in there. You just never want to be rage capped because then any rage generated while you're rage capped gets wasted because you can't fill it in your bar. Anyways, that's about it. That's the 2 rotations. That's what I wanted to go over. Again, just a basic rotation guide and the abilities you use for each build. I can see that my video is actually longer than I wanted my first one to be because many people will not watch it. Anyways, I want to thank you guys for watching this video. If you like it, please like it. If you don't, tell me in the comments what I did wrong, what I could do better. Subscribe if you feel like. I'm going to try and start doing this more consistently. Most of my videos are going to be focused on Arms Warrior when it comes to Warrior, but I do have some alts. I have a Demon Hunter, and I have a Paladin. Anyways, thank you guys again. Hope you enjoyed the video, and see ya.